My name is Vanessa Reed. I am 34 years old. I used to believe Christmas was about family, even if it meant driving hours, working overtime, and quietly covering expenses no one else acknowledged. But last December, something shifted. The group chats went silent, the shared drive disappeared, and a voicemail from my father confirmed what I feared. We all agreed, "You are not welcome this Christmas." At first, I thought it was simple rejection, but then I uncovered something far darker. They had been planning my erasure long before that night. While I was the one paying every utility bill, every mortgage payment, every cost that kept their celebrations possible. And when I discovered what they said about me when they thought I was not listening, the decision I made shook the very foundation of the home they celebrated in. This is not just a story about being excluded. It is a story about what happens when silence becomes evidence. When a family that thought they could erase you suddenly faces the weight of what you carried alone. Stay with me because by the end, you will understand how one quiet decision changed everything they believed they controlled. I did not know it yet, but the proof of everything I suspected was already waiting, hidden in the places I checked every day. It was a Wednesday morning in early December, cold enough that the windows in my apartment in Raleigh carried a thin layer of frost. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea cooling too quickly, my laptop open, waiting for something I already knew deep down would not arrive. Every year since I could remember, by the first week of December, there would be a chain of messages about Christmas. Who was making the turkey, who was handling desserts, what time we would all gather at my father's house in Winston-Salem. Sometimes the messages were warm, sometimes they carried an edge of sarcasm, but they were always there. This time, my inbox was empty. I refreshed the screen once, then again, then a third time, the way you do more from habit than hope. Still nothing. No subject lines with "holiday" in bold from my cousin Devin, no dramatic reminders from my brother Jared about bringing extra chairs. Just silence. I told myself maybe they had not started planning yet. Maybe someone was waiting on flight confirmations. But silence? That exact, that deliberate, is never accidental. I tried the family drive we had used for years. Each December, it held a folder full of menus, playlists, even gift registries. When I clicked on it, a red message appeared. Access denied. At first, I thought it might be a technical error, so I tried an old bookmarked light link. Same message, denied. It was like a door that used to swing open freely, now locked from the inside. My phone buzzed beside me. A text from my father. Gerald lit the screen. His words were brief. "Do not worry about Christmas this year. I figured you would be busy." There was no "we miss you," no "I hope you can join us," just a sentence that sounded more like a dismissal than care. The kind of message that does not invite a reply. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, the glow fading as if shutting me out too. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. I was not crying. I had stopped crying over things that predictable years ago. But there was a heaviness in my chest, a pressure I could not quite release. Familiar, yet heavier this time, like a door closing with a finality I could not ignore. I thought of last year. I had arrived at the house in Winston-Salem later than planned, stuck in traffic after a work call. My arms had been full of wrapped gifts, my hands cold from carrying a casserole I had made. When I stepped into the living room, not a single person acknowledged me. The dining table was crowded every seat taken. My brother Jared glanced at me and laughed. Look who finally decided to grace us. I never even caught who muttered it because laughter followed. And in that moment, it did not matter what mattered. What mattered was that no one moved, no one made room. I ended up eating from a paper plate in the kitchen, standing alone, while my relatives clinked glasses in the next room. I told myself then, it was a mistake. Just stress or holiday exhaustion. Families forget things, right? They forget you do not eat shellfish, or that you always bring the cranberry sauce. No one admits to loving, but everyone finishes. I let it go. But now, sitting in my apartment with that text burning in my pocket, it did not feel like a mistake. It felt orchestrated, like a vote had been taken and my name struck from the list. The tea had gone cold. I poured it into the sink and watched the amber swirl disappear. Outside, the street was bright with neighbors hanging lights, the sound of children shouting as they ran between yards. Inside, the air felt heavy. I closed the laptop, not because there was nothing more to search, but because I already knew what I would not find. Morning settled into me the way frost settles on glass, thin and invisible until you breathe and realize you cannot see through anymore. I stayed at the table longer than I should have, phone face down, apartment silent except for the low tick of the clock on the wall. My father's words replayed in my head. Do not worry, as if the absence of a seat at the table was supposed to be a favor. I pushed the chair back, stood, and walked to the window. Across the street, a family was unloading boxes from a van. The mother adjusting a wreath while the father balanced a stack of gift bags. It looked effortless, the way they laughed at the chaos, the way their son ran circles around them. I watched until my breath fogged the glass, until I had to step back. The silence of my apartment pressed heavier after that. No invitation, no plans, only the clear understanding that whatever family meant in our house, I was not included in it anymore. And for the first time, I let myself feel it, not like a bruise to be hidden, but like a fracture that would not heal on its own. I did not reply to my father's message. I did not send a question to Jared. I just let the phone stay dark and the room stay quiet, because deep down, I already knew this was only the beginning. The phone rang just after 9 that night when I was folding laundry, the vibration rattling against the dresser. I glanced at the screen and saw the word Dad in capital letters, the same way it had been saved years ago when I first set up the phone. I let it go to voicemail, standing frozen with a shirt still in my hands. When the chime indicated a new message, I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed play. His voice filled the room, flat and too rehearsed. We all agreed you are not welcome this Christmas. There was no hesitation, no sadness, no attempts to soften the words. It sounded less like a father struggling with a choice and more like a corporate decision handed down without appeal. I sat very still, my thumb hovering above the screen. The message replayed once, then again, the same measured tone. By the second replay, I was saving it, my finger steady even as my stomach nodded. I knew I would want that recording later, proof that what I heard was not just in my head. I set the phone on the comforter beside me and stared at the ceiling. The words echoed in my chest, heavier each time. Not I feel it, might be easier. Not it hurts to say this, just the collective we, the cold verdict. It felt like being voted out of my own bloodline. The next morning, I woke early, restless from dreams that left me with clenched fists and a pounding head. I reached for the phone as soon as I sat up. The group thread that had been air for years, labeled Read Family Holidays with my brother's excessive use of emojis, was gone. Not archived, not muted, gone. I scrolled through the other conversations searching for remnants, but it was as if I had been lifted clean out of their digital lives. Out of habit, I tapped on Facebook, though I rarely checked it anymore. The first post on my feed was a picture of Devin, my cousin, holding a champagne flute at my father's dining table. Around him were familiar faces, 12 in total, my father's hand resting on Devin's shoulder like a coronation. The caption read, "Doing what is best for the whole family is not always easy, but it is worth it." I zoomed in on the picture until the pixels blurred. The same chandelier I had helped my father install, the same dining chairs I had picked out and paid for, now filled with bodies that had voted me out. My chest tightened, not with surprise, but with confirmation. There was no empty seat left for me, no place card waiting. I scrolled down and saw a comment from my cousin Natalie, hard choice, but necessary. Another from Jared with a line of clapping emojis. I closed the app quickly, but the words had already lodged in my chest like a stone. The apartment was quiet again, the hum of the heater the only sound. I stood at the counter and poured a glass of water. I barely drank. My reflection in the kitchen window looked unfamiliar, eyes darker, shoulders tense. I whispered the words to myself, testing how they sounded outside of my head. We all agreed. Saying it out loud made it real in a way even the recording had not. By noon, I tried to distract myself with work emails, typing out responses that felt mechanical. My phone buzzed again, a notification that the Reed Family Holidays group had been renamed, The Chosen Ones. The name flashed across my screen like a taunt. I tapped it, but of course, access was denied. For a moment, I considered calling Jared, demanding an explanation, but I set the phone down instead. I knew exactly what he would say, that I was too sensitive, that I created tension, that it was better this way. They always had an excuse wrapped up in a tone that made me feel like the problem. I went back to the voicemail that night, playing it again while I sat at the kitchen table. The same flat voice, the same sentence. It was astonishing how easily a family could edit someone out, as if silence and denial were cleaner than confrontation. I stared at the folder icon on my laptop where our holiday photos used to be stored and thought about how quickly things could be erased. Later, while scrolling through old emails, I stumbled on one from last year. Jared had written a reminder in all caps not to forget napkins. He had included me, had even tagged my name with a sarcastic note about my late arrival. I read it twice, then closed it. The difference between then and now was too sharp. Last year, I was the punchline. This year, I was not even in the room. I pushed my chair back and paced the apartment, the boards creaking beneath my steps. Each word echoed with every pass of the room. Cold, convenient, not family. Eventually, I sat again and opened my laptop, dragging the file into a folder I had just created. My cursor hovered for a long time before clicking the icon. The icon appeared beside the others. Another piece of proof. This one hurt more than any number on a spreadsheet. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, my throat tight. It was strange how quickly the line between suspicion and certainty could be crossed. For years, I told myself I might be imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive. One short voicemail ended that debate forever. The next morning, I woke with the kind of heaviness that comes from carrying something unresolved through the night. I made coffee and sat at the table with my laptop, not to check emails this time, but to open the spreadsheet. I had kept for years rows of numbers stretched down the screen, neat and predictable, each one a quiet reminder of what I had carried month after month. Mortgage, utilities, property taxes, insurance, it was all there. I clicked into the mortgage tab and scrolled to the very beginning, January 2020, the first payment. 4 years of steady withdrawals, each line marked with the same figure, $1,580. 48 months of my life recorded in tidy cells. I traced the column with my finger as if I could feel the weight of it through the glass. That house had consumed more of my income than anything else. I had paid for vacations I had skipped, clothes I never bought, dinners I turned down. Also, the payment could slide quietly out of my account on the first of each month. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. For years, I had told myself it was temporary, that once my father stabilized financially, he would take over. I remembered the conversation in his kitchen when he asked me to co-sign. His voice had been casual, his hand waving it off like it was no big deal. Just until the bank is comfortable, Vanessa, he had said. We will switch it once things settle. I had believed him, because back then I still believed promises from him. I opened the digital folder where I kept scanned copies of important documents and clicked on the loan file. The PDF loaded slowly, the black text stark against the white background. At the top was my father's name, Gerald Reed, listed as sole owner. Below that, in smaller type, my own name appeared, not as owner, not as co-owner, but as co-borrower, the one who made the loan possible but held no claim to the house itself. I stared at the words until they blurred. My chest grew tighter in a way that felt less like shock and more like confirmation of something I had tried not to see. All this time, I thought I was holding us both afloat. In reality, I was just the safety net he strapped on for convenience, the silent support he could discard whenever he wanted. I pushed the chair back and stood, pacing the length of the apartment. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy. I pulled the document up again on my phone just to see if the words looked different on a smaller screen. They did not. Owner, Gerald Reed. Co-borrower, Vanessa Reed. My jaw tightened. The heater clicked on, rattling softly, but the sound only reminded me of the Utilities tab in my spreadsheet. I flipped back to the computer and opened it. Gas, electric, internet. $295 a month, $320 another depending on the season. Every confirmation email still saved in my inbox. I had set all of them to autopay years ago, telling myself it was easier to manage, easier to keep things steady for him, easier to not think about whether anyone even noticed. I thought of the nights my father had hosted gatherings in that house, lights glowing, oven running, laughter spilling into the yard, all of it powered by accounts with my name at the top. No one ever asked if the payments were heavy. No one ever offered to share the load. It was just assumed Vanessa will handle it. I closed the spreadsheet and pressed my palms flat against the table. My reflection in the dark laptop looked unfamiliar, harder somehow. The numbers had always been neat, but now they felt like chains. Every dollar tied to a memory I was not even allowed to sit at the table for. I walked to the kitchen counter and pulled a folder from the drawer, the one where I kept physical copies of certain documents I never trusted entirely to the cloud. The paper was crisp, the notary stamp sharp against the corner. I read the language again, each legal phrase another nail locking me into responsibility without recognition. Anger rose in me, sharp and sudden, then drained into something colder, claret. I had been paying for a house I would never call mine, keeping warm rooms for people who laughed at me from the dining table, feeding a system that had no seat reserved for me. I set the folder down and pressed the lid closed. The apartment was silent again, but this time the silence carried a different edge. It was not emptiness, it was awareness. I made another cup of coffee, though I barely drank the first. The steam curled upward, and I let it blur my vision for a moment before setting the mug aside. I opened a new folder on my laptop and typed 2 words into the name bar: frozen accounts. My fingers hovered for a moment, then pressed enter. The screen confirmed its creation, a small square icon waiting to be filled. I copied the mortgage statement first, then the utilities, then the insurance records. One by one, they slid into the folder like puzzle pieces fitting into place. Each file another reminder that I had not imagined the weight, that it was real, recorded, undeniable. By the time I closed the laptop, the light outside had shifted, the late afternoon sun washing the room in a pale glow. I stood at the window again, watching a delivery truck pull into the neighbor's driveway, the driver carrying boxes wrapped in festive tape. A child clapped from the porch. The sound carried up faintly through the cold air. I stayed there until the truck left, the porch lights flicking on, their house glowing warm against the evening. Behind me, my apartment stayed dim, the folder of evidence now sitting quietly on the desktop. I knew I would return to it, add to it, build it, until there was no way to deny what I had carried alone. For now, I just let the silence stretch. Not heavy this time, but steady, like a decision forming quietly in the background, waiting for its moment. 3 years earlier, I had stood in the lobby of a shipping store in Raleigh, balancing a stack of carefully wrapped packages against my hip. Each one was labeled with a name written in my neat handwriting, each one taped tight with care. I had worked extra hours that week just to cover the cost of overnight shipping. Inside the boxes were gifts I had chosen slowly over months, small things I thought would matter. A leather wallet my brother Jared had mentioned wanting in passing, a silk scarf in the exact shade my Aunt Rosalie used to wear in old photographs, ornaments for the tree that reminded me of ones we had when I was a child. I remembered the feel of the cardboard against my arms as the clerk printed out labels. The total was higher than I had planned, but I slid my card across the counter without hesitation. It felt worth it, I told myself. That when those gifts arrived in Winston-Salem, my father and brother would smile and maybe, just maybe, remember that I was part of this family, even from a distance. A few days later, I sat at my desk during lunch, scrolling through Facebook. The first picture that appeared was my father's living room crowded with relatives, wrapping paper scattered across the rug. I zoomed in quickly, searching for the gifts I had sent. They were there, the wallet on Jared's wrist, the scarf draped across my aunt's shoulders, the ornaments hanging from the tree. My chest warmed for a moment until I read the caption, "From all of us." I read it again, slower this time, waiting for my name. But there was nothing. My brother had written the caption claiming the gifts as a collective effort, as if I had been folded into a nameless group. Relatives commented with hearts and thank yous, no one asking who had picked the gifts, who had sent them overnight, who had stayed late at work to pay for them. My name did not appear anywhere. I sat there in the break room with the phone heavy in my hand. Around me, coworkers chatted about holiday travel plans, but I only heard the echo of my own thoughts. How quickly a person can be erased, how easily gratitude can be repackaged until you become invisible. It had not just been that Christmas, birthdays, passed the same way. The cake for my cousin Natalie had been ordered with my card, but the photos online thanked the family. Decorations I had bought appeared in pictures tagged as teamwork. Every effort I made was swallowed whole, renamed, reassigned. I told myself back then that it did not matter, that gifts were meant to be given without recognition. But sitting in my apartment now, staring at the glow of my laptop, I knew better. It had mattered. It mattered because the pattern was too clean. My presence was never acknowledged, but my money, my effort, my time, those were always welcome. I opened the frozen accounts folder again. The mortgage and utilities files were already there. Now I began pulling receipts from old emails, screenshots of online orders, shipping confirmations. I copied the photo of Jared wearing the watch, the one he had captioned as though it came from everyone. I dragged them into the folder, one by one. Evidence, not for anyone else, but for myself, so that when I doubted, I would remember I had not imagined it. The folder grew, small icons stacking neatly into rows, each one a record of how my name had been removed, but my effort remained. I scrolled through them slowly, my chest tightening as memories flickered. The scarf around my aunt's shoulders praised in comments as if it had appeared from thin air. The ornaments shining on the tree that no one admitted came from me. I sat back in my temples. My apartment was quiet. The only light, the blue glow from the screen. Outside, laughter carried faintly from a neighbor's apartment where music played. I thought of the laughter in my father's house that year, the way they had toasted around the tree, my gifts in their hands, my name absent. The silence inside pressed against me. But this time, I did not feel crushed by it. Instead, it sharpened something. I realized that what hurt most was not the money or the effort. It was the rewriting of memory. The way a family could cut your name out of the picture and still keep the pieces you had given. I highlighted the files in the frozen accounts folder and created a subfolder titled Erased. My hands trembled slightly as I dragged the photos and receipts inside. It felt like carving space for the truth, a place where my contributions could not be stolen or mislabeled. When I closed the laptop, the room was dark, except for the faint light of the street lamps filtering through the blinds. I leaned back in the chair and let out a breath I had been holding too long. The evidence was saved, the memories cataloged. For the first time, I felt the faint outline of control. Fragile, but real, like the first crack in ice before it splits wide open. The following morning, the first vibration on my phone came before I even made coffee. I picked it up expecting a work notification, but the screen showed Natalie's name. My cousin had never been one for casual conversation outside family events, so the short message startled me more than I expected. Everything feels easier without you around. I read it once, then again, waiting for my brain to catch up. There was no greeting, no buffer, just that one line, bare and sharp. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I did not type a reply. I took a screenshot instead and dropped the phone back on the counter. The words echoed in my chest, louder because they were so casual, easier without you. I moved through the motions of making coffee, spooting grounds into the filter, filling the pot with water. But each sound felt distant, the hiss of the machine, the drip into the pot, the smell filling the kitchen. I stared at the steam curling upward, trying to steady myself. when another buzz lit the counter. Mia, my youngest cousin, 23. The one who always seemed a little out of place at those crowded dinners. Her message was short, but different. "Can I call you?" I hesitated, then typed back, "Yes." The phone rang almost instantly. Her voice was careful, quiet, as though someone might overhear, even through the line. "I do not agree with what they did," she said. "I have something you need to hear." I straightened in the chair. "What do you mean, Mia?" There was a pause, the sound of her breath catching. "I recorded it, the way they talked about you last week. I could not let it just disappear." My pulse quickened. She promised to send the file, told me to keep it safe, and then hung up quickly, as if even the call itself carried risk. A moment later, a notification appeared, an audio file waiting in my inbox. I pressed play with trembling fingers. The sound was clear, the background chatter of glasses clinking faintly behind the voices. Jared spoke first, his tone sharp, dismissive. "She is cold. Everything she does feels calculated, like she wants applause for being decent." My father's voice followed, steady and unfeeling. "She is not really family. She is just useful." There was laughter, a ripple of agreement. Then Derek's voice slid in, measured like he was discussing numbers at a board meeting. "Do not rock the boat. Keep her name on the accounts. It is easier. No need to stir things up." The clip ended abruptly, silence swallowing the room around me. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hand, the words looping in my head. Useful, not family, cold. I set the phone on the table and pressed both palms against my eyes, until the darkness behind them sparked. Tears threatened, but did not fall. Right away, they came slowly, hot against my cheeks. Not loud sobs, but a quiet stream. I could not stop. For years, I had felt the shift, the way jokes carried an edge, the way silence grew around my contributions. But hearing it said out loud, recorded in their own voices, stripped away every doubt. They had sat in a room together, glasses raised, and reduced me to a utility, not a daughter, not a cousin, not a sister, just useful. I reached for a tissue, then another, but my hands shook as I wiped at my face. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer, the quiet almost unbearable. I stood and paced, the hardwood creaking beneath my steps. Each word echoed with every pass of the room. Cold, useful, not family. Eventually, I sat again and opened my laptop, dragging the file into the frozen accounts folder. My cursor hovered for a long time before clicking the icon. The icon appeared beside the others, another piece of proof. This one hurt more than any number on a spreadsheet. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, my throat tight. It was strange how quickly the line between suspicion and certainty could be crossed. For years, I told myself I might be imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive. One 10-second recording ended that debate forever. I pulled the laptop closer and opened a fresh document, the white screen glaring in the dimness of my apartment. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, hesitating for a breath before I began typing. A list. Mortgage, utilities, property taxes, insurance, internet, gas, electric, every account tied to that house in Winston-Salem, every thread that bound me to them without acknowledgement. The list stretched longer than I wanted, and with each word, my chest grew tighter. I stared at the lines until they blurred. This was the skeleton of my life for the last 4 years, invisible yet constant. I had kept them afloat without applause, without even a seat at their table. They had voted me out while still living on what I provided. The thought hardened inside me. If they wanted a family without me, then they could have it, stripped of the convenience I had quietly given. I reached for a notepad from the drawer and began copying the account numbers by hand. The act steady. .me, ink pressing into the page, each digit permanent. Next to them, I wrote the next scheduled draft dates, all neatly lined. January 1st, mortgage. December 27th, electric. January 3rd, property tax escrow. My handwriting looked firmer than it ever had, each number written like it was part of a contract. The clock on the stove blinked midnight. I poured myself another cup of coffee, stronger this time, and leaned against the counter as the steam fogged my glasses. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the mug, but the warmth steadied me. For once, the shake was not from fear. It was from the weight of choice. I walked back to the table, set the coffee down, and opened the bank's website. My username and password felt heavier than usual as I typed them in. The dashboard lit up clean numbers, lined across the screen. The mortgage balance, first, bold at the top. I scrolled through the payment history, row after row of my money sliding away each month. 48 months, all on time, never a missed payment. At the bottom of the page, a small button waited. Options. My cursor hovered, the drop-down opened with simple commands. Pause, freeze, cancel autopay. The words looked clinical, almost harmless. I sat there for a long moment, breathing slowly, feeling the heat of the coffee against my palm. I pressed the screen. Your request to freeze this account has been submitted. A small green checkmark blinked. I let out a breath. I had not realized I was holding it. It was done. I set the phone down gently as though the action itself carried ceremony. The silence in the apartment changed. It was no longer heavy with loneliness. It was sharp, decisive. The hum of the refrigerator sounded different, like a metronome keeping time with a new rhythm. I turned back to the laptop, opened another tab, and logged into the electric company. The balance was zero, thanks to autopay, but the account details still showed my name at the top. I clicked Manage. The same option appeared, Suspend. Then, saved a screenshot first, dragging it into evidence. Then, I pressed the button. A confirmation email arrived instantly. Service scheduled to end December 24th at 6 p.m. I smiled without meaning to. Gas and internet followed, each one frozen, each confirmation saved. I typed out notes in the notepad beside me, time-stamped, account numbers circled. My handwriting steadied more with each entry. This was not chaos, it was clean. By 3 in the morning, I had finished. Every account was locked, suspended, or scheduled to cut off. The folder on my desktop brimmed with proof. My shoulders ached from hunching over, but the fatigue felt different. It felt earned. I leaned back in the chair and let my eyes rest on the word frozen accounts printed across the folder icon. The irony almost made me laugh. They had erased me from their Christmas, scrubbed me from chats and photos, but now I had erased their safety net, the quiet machine that kept their house glowing and warm. Christmas Eve arrived with a brittle sky, the kind that holds its cold high in the air and lets it sink into the ground. I woke late that morning, stretched across the couch with the blanket tangled around my legs. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, with reminders from the frozen accounts, confirmation emails stamped with dates and times. I skimmed each one, then tucked the phone back face down. Everything was in motion now. The day passed quietly. I cooked myself eggs, toasted bread, and made tea. I walked to the corner store for milk, the sidewalks nearly empty. Most people already home, preparing for their celebrations. My own apartment stayed still. No decorations, no tree, no gifts stacked in a corner. I had stopped pretending. By evening, I sat with the book in my lap, though I barely read the words. My phone buzzed once, then again. At first, I ignored it, but the sound repeated. Ages stacking quickly. I leaned forward and picked it up. The screen lit with a flood of texts, each one from cousins, still at my father's house in Winston-Salem. The first said, "Power just went out." The next came seconds later. "Everything is dark. Dad is yelling." Another followed, "Catering tried to run the card and it was declined. No one can pay." I stared at the words, the corners of my mouth tightening, though I did not smile. I scrolled as more arrived. Guests, confused, people lighting candles. Devin posted in a group chat asking if anyone had extra flashlights. The image formed in my mind too clearly. The crowded dining room gone dark, the turkey cooling in silence, voices rising as panic spread. A new message popped up, this one from Jared. "Did you do this?" I let the phone rest in my hand, my thumb brushing the edge of the screen. I did not type anything back. I did not need to. Another wave of texts followed, faster now. Dad called Duke Energy. They told him the account is inactive. Dad is shouting at customer service, saying it must be a mistake. Then the next one, sharper. The representative told him the primary holder froze the account. The words settled into me, colder than I expected. This account has been frozen by the primary holder. A line spoken by some stranger in a call center, but in my mind, I could hear it drop into the room like a gavel. I pictured my father standing in his kitchen, cordless phone pressed to his ear, face stiff as the words sank in. Derek shifting uncomfortably at his side, realizing what it meant. Jared pacing, his voice shrill, trying to find someone else to blame. Guests whispering, coats being pulled from the rack, the warmth of the house dissolving into shadows. Another message came from Natalie. People are leaving. Half the table already walked out. Dad looks like he is about to collapse. I set the phone on the coffee table, screen up this time, and watched the messages roll across it like ticker tape, each one a snapshot of the unraveling. Kids crying because the lights would not turn back on, my uncle trying to start the gas fireplace but failing, someone's dessert order canceled because the card bounced. In the distance outside my window, the faint sound of car horns echoed from the highway, people heading to their own celebrations. I leaned back, the phone still lighting up with panic. My apartment glowed soft with the single lamp by the couch. The contrast felt almost unreal. Their chaos, my calm. At 6:35, Jared's name appeared again. Answer me, this is your fault. I let the notification fade. A few minutes later, another text arrived, this time from Mia. Quiet as always. They know it was you. No one is saying it out loud, but they know. I picked the phone up, read it twice, then placed it down again. My chest was steady, my breathing even. They had called me cold. Maybe that was true. Cold did not waver. Cold kept its shape. By 7, the messages slowed. The party had fractured, guests scattering into the night. The last text that came through was from Natalie. Everyone is gone. House is dark. Dad just keeps saying your name. I stood and walked to the window. Across the street, my neighbor's house glowed bright with strings of lights and a tree framed in the window. Laughter carried faintly across the cold air, muffled but clear. I let my palm rest against the glass, the chill seeping into my skin. Behind me, the phone buzzed once more, then went still. I did not reach for it. I let the quiet settle in, steady and unbroken, while their night unraveled in the dark. Miles away, the morning light crept across my blinds in thin, pale stripes, and for the first time in years, I let myself stay in bed without rushing anywhere. My phone was heavy on the nightstand, still littered with messages from the night before. I scrolled through them lazily, rereading the panic I had already memorized. A new notification blinked at the top. It was a news alert from the Winston-Salem Journal. I tapped it open and the headline pulled me upright. Gerald Reed steps down as host of annual community Thanksgiving potluck. The article was short, almost clipped. The community board had released a statement thanking the community but announcing a change of leadership due to inconsistencies regarding donor contributions. My father's name was missing from the list of acknowledgments. I read it twice, my pulse slow and steady. They had not printed my name, but they had carved his out. An hour later, my phone rang with a number I recognized from years ago. Rachel Cooper, a journalist I had once worked with during a fundraiser campaign. Her voice was brisk but cautious. I have received documentation about financial support for the Reed property. Can you confirm the authenticity? I walked to the kitchen, poured coffee into a mug, and leaned against the counter. Yes, I said, every receipt is mine. The payments, the utilities, the mortgage, all of it. Rachel paused, then asked if I wanted to go on record. I told her no. I had no interest in a spotlight. I only wanted the truth to breathe. She thanked me and promised accuracy in her coverage. The call ended with the faint click of her keyboard, already typing. By noon, the community board's website had been scrubbed. Photos from the event disappeared. My father's name vanished from every page that once praised him as a benefactor. In its place was silence, a glaring gap where his reputation used to sit. I sat back on the couch with my laptop resting against my knees, scrolling through the changes. There was a strange satisfaction in watching his carefully polished image unravel so publicly. He had built his life on appearances, on hosting dinners that looked generous, while the weight of it rested on me. Now the mask had slipped and the world could see the hollow underneath. The messages from my cousins kept coming. Jarrett wrote in all caps, demanding to know what I had sent. Natalie accused me of destroying the family name. Devin said nothing, just sent an image of the darkened house with candles glowing weakly in the windows. Mia texted quietly, "They are panicking. They blame each other." Later that afternoon, another call came, this one from an unfamiliar number. The man on the line introduced himself as a compliance officer for the firm where Derek worked. His voice was clipped, professional. "We have received an audio file regarding Mr. Reed's comments on documentation practices. Effective immediately, he has been placed on administrative leave while we review." I murmured acknowledgement, gave no extra detail, and let him hang up. The room was silent again, except for the hum of the heater. I imagined Derek sitting in his office, blinds drawn, his supervisor playing back the recording of his voice. "Do not rock the boat. Keep her name on the accounts. It is easier. No need to stir things up." The irony struck deep. For years, he had dismissed me with those exact words, smooth and calculated, as though reducing me to paperwork was harmless. Now those same words had circled back, stripping him of his authority. I pulled my blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared at the snow beginning to fall outside. Each flake hit the glass and melted instantly, leaving thin streaks of water. My chest felt lighter. Not joyful, not triumphant, but steady. The next week, I drove across town to the bank, the road still edged with dirty snow from the last storm. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of winter morning that makes the world feel quiet before it stirs awake. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment with the folder on the passenger seat. Mortgage transfer, printed in red ink. Inside were notarized forms, account records, every piece of proof I had prepared. When I stepped inside, warmth of the building wrapped around me, the faint smell of coffee drifting from behind the counters. A teller greeted me and directed me to a loan officer's office. I followed the carpeted hallway, each step steady, each breath slow. The officer looked up from his desk as I entered, his smile professional but neutral. I placed the folder on the desk, sliding it toward him. "I need to remove my name from the mortgage on a property in Winston-Salem. The account is in both names, but the title belongs solely to Gerald Reed. He will assume full liability." He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder, scanning the documents carefully. His pen tapped once against the desk before he nodded. "You have the notarization. This is complete. By signing here, you release any responsibility tied to this loan." I took the pen, the weight of it firm between my fingers, and signed my name one last time. The officer stamped the papers, the sound sharp against the quiet office. It was done. The house no longer tethered me. The mortgage, the taxes, the endless bills, they were no longer mine to carry. As I walked back to my car, the cold bit against my cheeks, but I felt lighter. My boots crunched against the frozen sidewalk, each step an exhale. Back in my apartment in Raleigh, I set my laptop on the table and opened the frozen accounts folder one last time. Screenshots, receipts, recordings, every file lined up in neat rows. For months, it had been my shield, my record of survival. I scrolled slowly, then closed the lid. It was not a weapon anymore. It was a period at the end of a long sentence. I made myself coffee, the familiar sound of the machine filling the room. The smell drifted warm through the air as I settled by the window, mug cupped between my hands. Outside, the snow had begun again, flakes drifting soft and steady, coating the street in white. The world looked quiet, almost new. I whispered the words out loud, not for anyone else, but for myself. I did not destroy them. I only stopped giving them access to my sacrifice. The truth landed like a stone, dropped into still water, rippling out, but settling steady. For years, I had believed that love meant giving without end, that loyalty meant silence, even when it cut deep. But sitting in that small apartment, watching snow fall across Raleigh, I finally understood. Walking away was not cruelty, it was survival. My phone sat on the table, dark and silent. No new messages, no threats, no pleas. And I did not reach for it. Instead, I took another sip of coffee and let the warmth fill me, a reminder that peace could be this simple. If you have ever carried a family that refused to see you, if you have ever poured yourself into people who only called you useful, I hope you hear this. You are not weak for walking away. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is freeze the access to your sacrifice and step back into the light of your own life. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose peace over obligation, or walk away from a table that no longer had a seat for you? Share your story in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, and if this story touched something in you. Make sure to subscribe so you do not miss the next one. There are more stories ahead, more voices to be heard, and more truths we are finally ready to tell.